وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا مع ليلى الحسيني في بث حي ومباشر وعبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan with Layla Al-Husseini. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues with your host, Layla Al-Husseini.
And good morning, everybody. This is Ray Hanania. It's Friday, July 24th, 2020. And I'm the special U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper, Ray Hanania again. You're listening to Radio Baladi, the Arab Street radio and podcast, broadcast from Detroit, Michigan through 690 AM WNZK radio. The Arab Street radio and podcast is part of the U.S. Arab Radio Network, hosted by Layla Al-Husseini, in an effort to energize and empower Arab Americans to stand up for their rights. For more information, go to my website at hanania.com. And afterwards, visit my podcast site on iTunes, Spotify, or my podcast website at thearabstreet.org. The radio show call-in number is 248-557-3300. We're not going to take calls in the beginning. We'll do some, toward the end. Of course, we're going to talk about this battle between Rashida Tlaib and Brenda Jones. And we have two guests on today, both pollsters and political analysts from Greater Detroit. And we're going to talk to them about what they each see in the developing Rashida Tlaib and Brenda Jones contest in the 13th District, August 4th. My first guest is Ed Sarpolus. Ed's been on our show before. He's founder and executive director of Target Insight, recognized one of Michigan's most notable pollsters, analysts, and strategists. He's been involved in many political election campaigns and analyzing him, and we're really glad to have him on this morning. Ed, thank you so much for joining the show.
Well, I'm very pleasureful, and just a little bit of background for your viewers. I grew up in Detroit and actually lived in this congressional district. In 2011, Congressman John Connors, the predecessor, hired me to basically help him with that district, manage his campaign in 2012 and assisted in 2014. Both Brenda Jones-Tlaib, I've helped them over the last 20 years to win their own races. So they're also friends of mine. And so I know the district and I know the individuals, both of their friends, and they're both competitors.
Yeah, and that must be interesting, to do a race like this. But it does give you some insight that you have all that experience on it. You recently released a poll that shows Rashida doing really well, in comparison to Brenda. And I know it was only a few questions, but it would have been interesting to dig deep into it to see what was driving some of that. But Rashida clearly has a lot more money than Brenda Jones. And I'm wondering, is it the money driving this election, do you think? Or are we not seeing what everybody actually thinks?
Well, basically, I've been tracking in this district now for the last 4 years, and I talked to black leaders and Arab leaders because I've done a lot. Matter of fact, during 2001, I actually had the privilege of doing Arab radio when Al Jazeera first started. So I've been working with the Arab community quite a long time. So thank you for being on your show. The important thing to understand is that you got to understand that. Rashida has always been beatable. So the fact that she's leading is because of the fact of the campaign that she's running and her funding. Okay, and right. Secondly, and the other important thing is that Brenda Jones never really got off the ground last year. First of all, Brenda Jones was not the first choice to run against Rashida. It was Sheriff Benny Napoleon. He decided not to run. So Brenda Jones was the only other candidate. She never really got started in this race till almost the middle of the winter, and that's way too late to take on a strong candidate like Rashida. And what I'm seeing in the polling and talking to interest groups, Brenda Jones has done no community outreach of any consequence. She's out. She didn't. No one really knows her out county.
Well, you mean in terms of campaigning? because she's the president of the Detroit City Council. I mean, she has to be pretty well known in Detroit, at least, right?
But only in the city. Outside right now, 40% or more of the people out county don't know who Brenda Jones is.
Right. I mean, even though she's been in the news all those years, are people that narrow focused? I guess, and maybe it is. I mean, we see that in Chicago, a lot. But I think you're right. I think Brenda didn't start this campaign soon enough. And we only have, a couple more weeks left, 2 weeks, I think. And money is a driving force, isn't it? Rashida is spending a lot of cash. But did you hear enthusiasm when you were doing the polling?
Yes, I did hear enthusiasm. As a matter of fact, I did a couple other radio shows, and they've called me talking about their enthusiasm for Rashida, about their impression. Matter of fact, I understand Rashida's received another $100,000 in TV buy for her in the district this week. I also found that almost all the labor groups have now endorsed Rashida over Brenda. So bottom line is, right now everybody's moving towards Rashida. Now I will tell you this, that the numbers still show that if Brenda Jones could create a message and had the funding, she could make it competitive. So it still could be very close. But right now, the movement has been towards Rashida by labor groups, by interest groups, by financial groups, and because Rashida's been doing the homework. And when I helped Rashida early on when she was running for state rep in another district, she did the door-to-door, okay? She did the community outreach, and that's been her mark. And as a matter of fact, when she won, 2 years ago, and I talked to her the last weeks of the campaign, what I was seeing polling, I've been polling like I said in this district, and she listens. For example, when I talked to her about polling showing that she needed to be more aware of stuff, she wouldn't spend $300,000 on TV. She's a very shrewd campaigner. She's smart, and she works very hard. And Brenda, like I said, and the other thing on Brenda Jones's favor, the COVID-19 stopped her from doing any grassroots because she thought she had the time. She got COVID-19 herself, and the funding never materialized, okay? And it was important, for example, she was counting on, because of some of Rashida's comments, we know about those, she was hoping that maybe the Jewish community would come to her aid. Well, Rashida's been reaching out to the Jewish community. They're not giving money to Brenda Jones, okay? And so it is the most point. But isn't
the issue more, Ed, don't you think the issue, I mean, I know that the Middle East is a big issue because, I'm Arab, obviously, and I'm Palestinian. But isn't the bigger issue like the 13th district itself? I mean, I think there's been a legitimate criticism that Rashida has spent more time on the national stage than she has addressing local issues in the 13th district. Hasn't that been a factor, or is it because these are such big headlines, nobody's been able to actually focus on that?
Well, what we've got to understand in politics, Brenda never became the solution, okay? The reason why there's a much larger undecided and Rashida is still beatable because there is that question about it. When I do the job reading, when I talk about yes, that's on her mind, but the point, Brenda Jones has not become the solution, okay?
Right. Brenda's campaign hasn't been very strong. She doesn't have a lot of money. She started late, and even if you get, she did have coronavirus, but even with coronavirus, she should have started this campaign a long time ago, I think. Do you think she got in there reluctantly, maybe bitter about the last election?
Well, she got in because she felt she was cheated out of that race, okay? That's
right.
The fact that
there's something to that, isn't there, Ed? Isn't there something to that? I mean, when you look at the two races, there's a difference of almost 3,000 votes. There was a drop-off. That special election to finish the term confused a lot of people, and not everybody voted, I think. It was weird, wasn't it?
Well, it was weird, but you got to remember, Brenda Jones 2 years ago had the same problem she has today. She didn't have a grassroots team. She did not get the funding. Good
point.
And so you got to remember the fact is that a lot of the funders on both sides, the Rashidas and Brenda Jones, know me, so they call me and they tell me what they're doing. Okay, and so the issue is the fact is that right now people are not convinced Brenda was going to win. Brenda Jones got in because she felt she was cheated, which rightfully I agree with you, but that means what are you going to do to change it? Okay.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that.
And she didn't do that. And so what you found is that the bottom line, everybody I talked to who could give her money says, well, she didn't do anything in 2019 to convince us that she was really going to go out and do what it takes to win this race.
Right. And it comes down to what are you going to do to win the race, right? Because it doesn't seem like either of the candidates are really talking about issues. I don't see that debate between them about what the 13th district needs. We all know Rashida has a huge platform on the national stage because of the Middle East, her fight against Trump. She's embraced a lot of these national issues. But, I mean, are you telling me really that voters in the 13th district are more interested in the celebrity aspect of this race rather than, is my wife better in the 13th district?
No, what happens for Rashida has a base of likability of the grassroots work that she's been doing most of her life in that area. Remember, she's from the Del Rey area, okay? And she fought a lot of things. When she was a community organizer, when she was working for state reps and state senators, when she was a state house race candidate, all the issues she's taken on. She has a reservoir of support. She's been more active and more visible in the community than Brenda Jones has ever had in her political career. And so that's left over, okay? Number two, Rashida's worked out county a lot more. You got to remember, out county, even though 56% of the vote will be African American, and because I work with John Connors, for example, you have the Yemeni community, you have the Lebanese community, the Arab community, you have the Chaldean community, you got the Iranian community. There's a large population, which I don't have to tell you that.
Do you think the Arab community is 100% behind Rashida? Because I get a lot of Chaldeans. They're not Arab, but they're Middle Eastern, who speak Arabic, as you know, obviously.
I'm Catholic, and they're Catholic.
They don't support Rashida.
Oh, I agree with you, but you got to remember the people who are voting, okay, are the people who are basically looking for somebody to talk about their issues, okay? And Rashida's been out there a long time, and where she got her bigger bounces is she was one of the first people who took on Donald Trump, okay? And they didn't like what she may have. So the bottom line is that the people that are voting, the senior citizens, looking for a voice. And I tell people the fact that in Detroit, despite what you hear, the fact people of color, people of other communities have vote for people that are not of their race or ethnicity. You know, Detroit votes for a white mayor. All the city council people. You see, Detroit and Metro Detroit, if they see you and touch you and hear you and they see that you're working hard, they may not always agree with you, but they will support you. Brenda Jones has never built that kind of type of support.
Right, and I think you're right. I think your analysis is pretty right on. I mean, just personally, my problem with Rashida has nothing to do with the politics. It has to do with her personality. She hates me because a friend of mine is somebody that she doesn't like, you know, and what am I going to do? And then she blocks people out. I think that's her big flaw, that she kind of reflects the problem that many that I see among extremists in the Arab community, that it's more about personality than issues sometimes. So Rashida and I have a bad relation. She refuses to come on the radio show. I've invited her a million times. And I am the political writer in the Palestinian community in America.
I know that.
I'm the one who writes and covers all these issues, but she won't come on the show. So what are you going to do? You know, but Brenda is smart enough to talk to me, and but we'll see, huh? This is interesting. What are you looking for on August 4th? What are the signs that you think could drive this election?
I'm looking to something long before August 4th. You got to remember, maybe it's possible that before Election Day, 60% of the vote, we've already voted absentee in this district, okay?
That's true. You're right.
Okay, so what I'm going to be looking at
most of the people probably voted already, right?
That's correct. And I will tell you something that I learned with John Conyers, that the people, the Arab community and Yemeni community, if you're not in the country, if they support you, they're getting those absentee ballots from their community all over the world into that ballot box. So I'll be checking the absentee ballots from Dearborn Heights and from the Dearborn areas and downriver and Delray area and see where they're coming from. If they're coming from, or if I see the absentee votes are leaning to Rashida, then it tells me the fact that the excitement for Rashida is for real. It's not fake.
Yes. Have you been able to see any trends yet in that early voting, or we don't get those numbers yet? Well,
there is some trends because I poll for absentee voters. Those who are senior citizens are definitely leaning, the super seniors, as I call them, in African America, they're leaning Rashida. And the reason that is the fact, in Detroit, you have to earn the right to run. You have to go door to door. They have to see you and talk to you. Brenda Jones has not done that. She didn't do it in 18. She didn't do it. So Rashida has like a bill. Another case of a Puerto Rican Hispanic, Sylvia Santana and Harvey Santana. They win in the black community because they go door to door every year. Okay.
Yeah.
They're outreach to those back. That's what happened. Burton Leland, when he was rep, he worked all those communities of color, and they said, well, you're come and see me. Okay. That's what counts in Metro Detroit is the fact they want your door to door. They're talking, whether you're of the same race or ethnicity, it doesn't make a difference as long as you're seeing them and talking to them.
That sounds great. Listen, Ed, I love having you on the show. I really enjoy politics, and it's very kind of you to come in. If I do another show before the 4th, I want to bring you on. So, because this race is a hot one. You know, having covered politics for 45 years and Chicago City politics for 20 years at City Hall, I love to see the trends, and I know they flip back and forth.
Well, very quickly, I agree.
Go ahead.
The city council districts in Chicago that you're running in now, I helped draw those for the last census. So those are my lines. And number 2,
well, I'm going to bring you on to talk about that sometime.
And the other
we
thing,
have to do that.
Once I release Rashida's poll, it's already gone national. Okay.
Right.
That's how tough this race is. Well, thank you for your time. I enjoyed being on your show.
Ed, thank you so much. What's your website if people want to follow you and see what else is going on? Where would they go?
Well, the bottom line, let me give you my phone number. It's better that they call me, okay? And because a lot of my clients are private clients and polling like that. It's 517-927-9776.
All right, Ed Sarpolus, founder and executive director of Target Insight. Thank you for joining us this morning. I really appreciate talking to you, buddy.
My pleasure. You have a good day.
All right, Ed, thanks. I'm Ray Hanania here at the Arab Street Radio and Podcast, broadcast through WNZK AM 690 Radio in Detroit, Michigan. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with another guy that I really admire and respect, Dennis Denno of Denno Research, another political animal just like me. He lives and breathes politics, and we're going to look into the Rashida Tlaib and Brenda Jones race. But first, we're going to take a break. So we'll be right back right after these messages.
Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493.
الحسن شايفك لازم جاي حالك عن
إلي ساعة عم بستناك مشان نروح نتغدى بالشام.
الشام؟
إيه بالشام ومو بالشام.
شلون صارت هي؟
بدل ما نروح نتغدى بالشام
إيه
جابوا لنا الأكلات الشامية الطيبة لعنا لهم.
وشلون بقى؟
هذا مطعم دماس عم يعمل كل الأكلات الشامية الطيبة هو.
وطيبة؟
طيبة كتير.
شرفوا نتغدى سوا بمطعم دماس.
الأكل الشامي الأصيل فقط بدماس كوزين. زوروهم على 28841 أورشد ليك بفارمينغتون هيلز، ولطلباتكم اتصلوا على 248-987-4609. That's 248-987-4609. دماس كوزين and catering، جبنا لكم الشام لعندكم.
When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
And welcome back to the Arab Street Radio and Podcast, broadcast through WNZK AM 690 radio in the greater Detroit, Michigan region. I'm Ray Hanania, U.S. Special Correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. I've been covering politics all my life. I live and breathe politics. I love it. So I love to talk with our guests on, especially when we have a big race coming up, August 4th, the battle between Rashida Tlaib and Brenda Jones. And we're going to talk to our next guest, Denno. Dennis is a great writer. This guy understands politics. He's been very fair, very accurate, and I'm really proud to have him on. He founded Denno Research in 2004, and for over 25 years, he's helped candidates and elected officials shape issues and communicate with constituents. Dennis, thank you so much for joining the radio show this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me on. That's quite an introduction. I really appreciate it.
That's okay. You're a good guy, Dennis.
Listen, are you? Thank you.
We only have an hour. Unfortunately, if we had more, I'd give you an even bigger plug. Okay.
That's all right. Thank you.
Arab community. Yeah, the Arab community isn't like everybody else. We get breadcrumbs. We think breadcrumbs are bread. So we get these little things. We should have a national radio show talking about all these issues, and I think one day we will because of people like you and others. So, Dennis, this race in the 13th District is the race that a lot of people are talking about. It comes up in 2 weeks, August 4th. What do you see happening from your perspective in terms of Rashida Tlaib and Brenda Jones? How do you think this race is panning out so far?
Yeah, well, first, if we ever have that National Arab American talk show, I hope you're the person to be leading it, because we need you to be doing that. But going to the Rashida Tlaib, Brenda Jones race, I mean, it's very interesting, right? Rashida Tlaib has all the resources, all the money. There's no question that Rashida Tlaib works really hard, right? I mean, she may not work really smart, but she works really hard.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah, but it's a predominantly African-American district, and let's not forget that Brenda Jones, almost won it last time, and there was, I think, 4 other African-Americans running, and Brenda Jones didn't have the resources. So it's kind of interesting.
And I agree with you, Dennis, because I'm going to tell you what, I don't care what the polls show, because first of all, we learned especially over the last few years, that polling doesn't necessarily accurately reflect people. People are not being honest a lot of times. They don't want to tell the truth. And I agree with you, this is a predominantly black district. The last election, there were 2 elections, it was confusing. And when you look at the 2 voter turnouts, the difference was 3,000 votes out of almost 90,000 at the high end. And Rashida only won by 900 votes. In the race where there were 4 black African-American candidates running for that seat. Now all of them are out except for one, Brenda Jones. And Rashida's big base, it seems, and you tell me if you agree or disagree, she's focused mainly on the Middle East and national issues. And I wonder, I think black and African-Americans and voters are smart to see and question, has she done enough in the 13th District? And I don't think people are focused on that. Nationally, the media focuses on what Rashida says nationally. But I don't think anybody's really focused on, did she do enough in the 13th District during her 18 months to win the hearts and minds of residents who need better, tax programs, jobs, and better schools and safety? I don't know. Do you agree with that, or do you think I'm off base? Is it all about celebrity headlines and the local vote doesn't matter anymore? We'll take this break and we'll be right back to continue the discussion here at the Arab Street Radio. I'm Ray Hanania. We'll be right back right after these messages.
Kashat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab offers a great array of your favorite Mediterranean meals. Meals range from lamb specialties, shawarma sandwiches, seafood dinners, and they offer special big trays of your favorite food, plus much more. Kashat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab address is 32839 Northwestern Highway in Farmington Hills. Their phone number is 248-538-9552. That number again is 248-538-9552, and the supermarket is open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Kashat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab will definitely leave you satisfied.
مركز طب رهاب للعلاج الطبيعي بإدارة الدكتور محمد فرح حسين، أخصائي العلاج الطبيعي بخبرة أكثر من 13 عاما. طب رهاب يقدم خدمات العلاج الطبيعي وإعادة التأهيل، ويضم مجموعة من أفضل أخصائي التشخيص الدقيق للحالات المرضية، مع خبرة عالية في التعامل مع الحالات التي تحتاج إلى إعادة تأهيل وعناية خاصة بعد العمليات والكسور. طب رهاب يستقبل كل الحالات المتعلقة بألم الرقبة، الظهر، المفاصل، شلل الوجه، الانزلاق الغضروفي، عرق النساء، الحوادث وإصابات العمل. خبيرات في المعالجة النسائية لخصوصيات تامة للسيدات. عندما تبحثون عن رعاية متميزة اقصدوا توب ريهاب للعلاج الطبيعي، الواقع على 15001 ميشيغان افنيو، وللمواعيد اتصلوا على 313-846-0555. That's 846-0555.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
And welcome back to the Arab Street Radio and Podcast broadcast from Detroit, Michigan through 690 AM WNZK Radio. I'm Ray Hanania, special U.S. correspondent for the Arab News newspaper. It's Friday, July 24th, and we're talking about the election that's only about 2 weeks away, maybe even less. I think maybe 10 days, right, or 11 days away. August 4th, between the hot race in the 13th district between Rashida Tlaib, the Congresswoman, and Brenda Jones, the president of the Detroit City Council. We have, Dennis, is the glare and the brightness of the national focus out, overshadowing the interests of the local 13th district? What do you think?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, look, I would argue that in general, when people are voting for a congressperson, especially in the 13th, where Rashida keeps reminding us over and over again, it's something like the third poorest congressional district in the country. I think people are voting bread and butter issues, right? Right. And so I do think that while I credit Rashida Tlaib for talking about Palestine and talking about issues in the Middle East that I care about, that I would argue our community cares about, it's obviously not an issue that a predominantly African-American community cares about. And let's face it, there have been and there still are tensions between our Arab-American community and the African-American community. So is that going to end up biting her? Is that going to end up biting her, or is that just, I'll tell you this anecdotally when I talk to people who live in the district, they like her. And I'm talking about African-Americans who live in the district. They like her, yes. But that's all anecdotal, right? I'm talking to a handful of people in the district.
Right, and I think that, of course, I think that polling, because listen, Rashida comes off with more money, bigger headlines on the national scene, and her weakness, I think, has been in the district, in the 13th district, and it depends on whether voters are going to focus more on, hey, we want somebody fighting with Trump. Although I can't imagine anybody in Detroit not fighting with Trump. It's not like Brenda is a supporter of Trump. Brenda Jones probably hates Trump as much as Rashida Tlaib does, although she may not use the F word the way Rashida did. But I think the bottom line when it comes to elections is local services. And, I wake up in the morning, and as much as I love Palestine myself and I want to fight all these other issues and stuff, I still have to look at my tax bill. I still have to look at how much money I'm bringing in. I still have to look at my kids to see what kind of education they're getting. I have to look at my neighborhood to see how safe it is. And if I lived in one of the poorest districts in the country, which, as you accurately point out, I would be looking at what did the congressperson do to change that. And I'm not sure Rashida addressed that at all. She may change it if she ekes past, but I don't believe the polls. I don't believe that people are honest anymore as they may have been before. and I don't think the polling that shows Rashida with such a strong lead is accurate. What do you think?
Well, if we're talking about the poll that came out a couple days ago that shows Rashida Tlaib at 52%, I think it's interesting that that same company that did that poll had something like a 26-point shift in like 2 or 3 months, and so I'm like, what's changed? What's changed in the 2-3 months to cause a 26-point shift? So I think when it comes to polling in general, I think we have to question that stuff, right?
Yes.
I don't
trust the polling.
I do a lot of polling with my company, and when you see that, I just have concerns. Rashida brags about having, I think, 4 community centers in her congressional district. And I don't know if that's real. I don't know what's really going on in there. I do think it's interesting that of the 4, the last one to open was in the city of Detroit, which I just think was kind of interesting.
That was the last one, right? And it should have been the first one.
It should have been the first one.
You would think, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. Maybe just trying to find a building, maybe just a rent issue. I don't know. I mean, just kind of clumsy things like that. Whether it's going to end up biting her, I don't know. It'll be very fascinating to watch. I do think it's obvious. I do think she's going to win. I do think it's hers to lose, only because she has the name. For the past 2 years, she's done a great job promoting herself, and she's got the resources.
Right. Money talks. Money will talk. But I've seen many elections where people that were at the top of the newspaper headlines, and locally she's more popular than she is nationally, obviously, but her name recognition is huge because she's constantly at the front of this fight representing the squad. But again, I still think, I'm telling you, when I go to the polls, and I think a lot of people, when they go to the polls, they still vote their own interests. And I wonder, though, if the issue here is that maybe has Brenda Jones run a strong campaign? Maybe she doesn't have the money, although she said she has the endorsement of every other candidate that ran in the last election. Ian Conyers, Coleman Young, the other candidates, they've endorsed her. Does that not help her? Or, they were 2/3 of the total vote. Rashida only got about a 1/3 plurality.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. I don't know how much. I think endorsements mean less and less every day, every election cycle. I think the interesting thing is, what is Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan going to do, if anything? I mean, I know they're not big fans of Rashida Tlaib. And I mean, I have reason to believe, I can't prove it, but I have reason to believe that quietly behind the scenes they're trying to help Brenda Jones, which I think would be really interesting. But the other question is, so Brenda Jones has all these endorsements, and let's just say she has the support of the mayor. Can she do anything with it? Does she know how to use those resources and those tools? And I don't mean that as a criticism of Brenda Jones. I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, how does she become the Detroit City Council president, though, if she, because if she doesn't know how to mount a strong grassroots campaign? Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, she's the Detroit City Council president. Is that job not that significant anymore? Does Detroit not matter anymore in the rest of Michigan? And what are the factors there? That's unusual to me, because if you told me that the president of the city council in Chicago, and we don't have a role as strong as Detroit City Council president in Chicago, but if you said that a heavy personality in Chicago was doing so poorly in a race, I would say, okay, there's something wrong with what that person is. Is it obvious, or is it just a lack of money, do you think? That she's from the poorest district. How are you going to raise money from the poorest district? Most of Rashida Tlaib's money is coming from outside the district, probably about 70% of it.
Right. And, let's face it, a lot of successful elected officials don't raise a lot of their money from within their district or even from within their state, So Brenda Jones is going to need help raising money from outside, and I assume if she is going to be successful, she's going to look at the Jewish community, the APAC groups, to help support her in this race. Right?
Is the Jewish community Is the Jewish community that influential in Detroit? As influential as the Arab community? I mean, have we ever weighed that to see, has their influence waned and weakened over the years, or are they still influential, you think? I mean, significantly influential in Detroit, the greater Detroit region?
Well, I think in the Metro Detroit community, our Jewish brethren are very, very powerful. Their vote is valuable, and they are very successful at working together and raising money. And nationally, let's face it, nationally, AIPAC's a very powerful group, and they would love to see Rashida Tlaib out of office.
Yeah, but it might be too controversial for them to get involved directly in this one. It's ironic that Rashida Tlaib may have insulated herself a little bit by being so outspoken, so high profile, that, it kind of makes her a little untouchable. People are going, oh, geez, we're not going to waste our time with that. She's probably going to win. She has this big high profile. She has the backing of all these people from around the country. We'll focus on other races. I still think, though, that polling is not, reflective of what reality happens. And I think at this point, as Ed mentioned in the first segment, a lot of people have already voted. A lot of people have already gone to the polls. So if I voted early voting and a pollster called me up, I would pretty much lie just to have fun with the pollster. I am not a good person to call, Dennis, if you ever do a poll, okay? Because I'm not going to be honest. I'm going to play with those numbers because I know how I voted already. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always going to be people who don't tell the truth, right? And so that's why you're trying to get a 300, 400, 600 representative sample, because you're hoping those one or two or three people who don't tell the truth are their numbers are going to be pretty minuscule. I think the problem becomes when you look at a race like Trump versus Hillary Clinton, in which there were maybe a significant number of Trump supporters who didn't want to admit on a live phone call that they were supporting Donald Trump. Then it becomes a problem. But I would argue that that's not frequent, right? I don't think that happens frequently.
Yeah, and that I really didn't care for Trump at all. I didn't look at him much. I just knew Hillary so well, and the Clintons, and in my opinion, how deceitful they were when it came to issues that were important to me, like the Middle East and Palestine and all that stuff. So I could not support Hillary. Trump was the only person on the ballot, and I think you're right. They shamed voters. So a lot of people wouldn't be honest and say, yeah, I'm going to support Trump. But I don't think there was any choice, and I don't believe in wasting a vote, to vote for a third-party candidate. I figured, okay, Trump, he's an unpredictable person. Maybe a wild card might shake up the game board and throw it up in the air and change things. I'm not sure he's done a good job. What do you think about his election coming up? I mean, this is an unusual pairing, isn't it, between Joe Biden, who has a perception that, maybe he's just too old and he's not completely there, and Donald Trump, who appears to be completely there, but is so wacky sometimes, and it's like, okay, we're stuck again. We got another one of those rough choices. What do you think's going to happen in that race? How's that playing out in Michigan?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure Donald Trump is all there. The guy can't even drink a cup of water with one hand. But
he's not the smartest. He's not the smartest guy. I am disappointed. When he was on TV, he was very popular. In his reality show. But I think he's kind of, been, like too petty. Somebody says something to him. He's kind of like Rashida in a way, in a different, not a political way, but in a personality way. You say something about them, you criticize them, and he takes it so personal, that this is politics. It's like a baseball game. Of course the Cubs want to beat the White Sox, right? It's not personal, but they take it so personal.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. This isn't going to be a popular thing to say on your show, but both Donald Trump and Rashida Tlaib are very similar. They're both bullies. They both don't like to be insulted, or they don't like to be criticized, and neither one of them can take a punch, right? So, but going back to Michigan, but going back to Michigan, I mean, Trump barely won Michigan. He did win Michigan, so I have to give him that, but he barely won it. And I know you don't believe the polls, but every poll I've seen, he is doing really poorly in Michigan. Michigan Democrats are very, very energized to beat Donald Trump. We were not energized. We Democrats were not energized 4 years ago. As much as I was proud to vote for Hillary Clinton, I realized that she was not very well liked, even amongst Democrats.
She just wasn't a strong candidate?
I just think she... look, who was the candidate who... economic message? It was Donald Trump. I mean, I didn't agree with his economic message, but Hillary Clinton...
Right, but he was talking about it. Right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people who are struggling in Michigan financially, right? And Donald Trump was able to play on people's fears. He was able to play on people's racism. And, I think it's crazy that, her husband, Bill Clinton, 4 years ago was telling her campaign, you need to talk about the economy, and they ignored him.
Yeah.
So, going back to Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden's playing it smart. Don't say anything. Don't do anything. You want this to be a referendum on the incumbent president, and this incumbent president is dumb enough to make it an incumbent, make it a race on himself.
He says,
stop talking.
Trump says stupid things all the time, and I think it's smart that Biden should just step back and let the focus sit on Trump. But you know what? Some Democrats, the egos won't allow them to do that. But so far, I think the fact that maybe Biden is having some minor issues, I think that that's playing into his advantage rather than being a disadvantage, because he is. You don't expect a debate, do you? I don't believe there's going to be a debate between Trump and Biden. I don't see it. Do you?
It's just funny. I was just talking to a political friend of mine. I really respect his opinion. Now, I was asking him what he thought, and he thought that, the tables have turned, where if I'm Donald Trump, I really, really want to debate Joe Biden, and if I'm Joe Biden, I want to be as far away from a debate as possible.
Because I agree with you that Biden, if he stays away from it, he has an advantage. He can actually benefit by staying out of the limelight a little bit.
Yeah, but here's the other thing. So 4 years ago, I think those debates, I can't believe I'm saying this, I think those debates really helped Donald Trump, because all he did was attack Hillary Clinton. Well, in theory, this time around, he has a record to defend, and it's not a very good record.
Yes.
So I think it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be an incredibly ugly, horrible election cycle. And I think at the end of the day, I think the Democrats are going to win the White House. I think they're going to win the U.S. Senate. They're going to keep the U.S. House.
Yeah, and listen, back 4 years ago when I said that I was going to support Trump over Hillary, and part of it was the arrogance. I think what really turned me off, not only those policies that I believe that the Clintons, the management, was the arrogance of Hillary. It was like she just felt, why are we wasting our time with an election? I'm the president. Let's just move forward. That came across so clear in her candidacy. It bothered me, a lot. But Trump, you're right. He has a record, and it's terrible. He hasn't done that great. I always thought Trump's big factor was going to be that he's the wild card and that he would explode the system. And in a way, I think he's done it. I think he's damaged the Republican Party. I think he's damaged, some of the big crazy Republican leaders that I thought were nuts, like Marco Rubio and Ted, what's his name? Some of these people I couldn't stand. I think he's damaged them, and I think that he's damaged the Republican Party more than a lot of Republicans are willing to admit. Dennis, can you hang on the line a little bit longer so we can take one more break?
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you.
All right, Dennis Denno's on the line with me, and I'm Ray Hanania here at the Arab Street Radio and Podcast, broadcasting from Detroit, Michigan through 690 AM WNZK Radio. Our number is 248-557-3300. We can take some phone calls. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll keep talking with Dennis Denno, who is the founder of Denno Research. a political analyst and commentator, and we'll talk a little bit about all the things that he's up to too, because I think he does a podcast. We want to promote that and get you his website too. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back right after these messages.
Are you going to start a restaurant or a grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
مرحبا سعيد.
أهلا علا.
ليش هالمقابلة الفاترة هاي؟ بيقول المثل لاقيني ولا تغديني.
يمه زعلتي، شنو رأيك إذا لقيتك وأيضا غديتك بأحسن مطاعم ميشيغان، مطعم عشتار؟
والله فكرة، أفضل الأطباق والمقبلات العربية والعراقية وأحلى ملقا.
ولا تنسين اللحوم الطازجة مباشرة من ملحمة عشتار لزباين عشتار. وملحمة عشتار توفر اختيارات متنوعة من كافة أنواع اللحوم وبأسعار متميزة وجودة أيضا مميزة. ملحمة عشتار تقع على 36865 راين رود في مدينة ستيرلينغ هايت.
وأكيد أحلى لمة وأطيب لقمة في مطعم عشتار اللي عنوانه 3625 15 مايل رود في مدينة ستيرلينغ هايت. هاتف 586-698-2585 586-698-2585.
يلا علا،
يلا عشتار، للجودة وكرم الضيافة عنوان
مطعم عشتار.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
And welcome back to the Arab Street Radio and podcast broadcast through 690 AM WNZK Radio. Our guest on the line is Denno. We had Ed Sarpolus on earlier at the beginning of the show from Target Insight, and Dennis is he's the founder of Denno Research. Let's go right to the phones. Of course, we have our friend Jerry Haba who calls in. A great guy, listens to us all the time at 248-557-3300. Jerry, because we're so tight, give us a comment and a question, and let's see what Dennis Denno can say about it.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ray Hanania. Thank you, and good morning to you, and good morning to Mr. Dennis Denno. My question is over here to Mr. Dennis Denno. Former President Barack Hussein Obama, when he was asked many times, who you going to endorse at the beginning of the 21 Democratic candidates for president, he did not give any name. Suddenly, President Barack Obama come to the picture, support Biden very strongly. When we see former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, she never appeared in the picture for her support. What is the secret, Mr. Dennis Denno, the former President Obama supporting Biden, especially nowadays? I appreciate your answer.
Jerry, great. That's a great question, too. Yeah, why? Where's Hillary Clinton in this election? It doesn't seem like she's doing anything. Jerry, thank you so much for the call. Dennis, what do you think?
Thank you.
Yeah, where's Bill Clinton? I mean, it just seems the Clintons are non-entities in this election cycle, right? I think there's a lot of Democrats who are just frustrated and fed up with the Clintons, and there's no question that Barack Hussein Obama is still incredibly popular in this country. I was really frustrated when Barack Obama, former President Obama, didn't endorse anyone early on, but now I kind of see it as a brilliant move on his part.
You kind of waited till the end rather than take any risk. But the Clintons, the only thing I can say about their absence is this: feeds into the problem that they have of entitlement. You know, they think they're a dynasty. They think they're royalty, political royalty, and they don't understand why they have to run. And it belongs to them. He was the president. The whole system, you know, should be in their pocket. And now I think it's kind of like they're angry. They don't want to get involved and help somebody else, even somebody like Joe Biden. You know, all these people that supported them. So that has always been the problem with the Clintons, in my eyes. They're so selfish when it comes to politics. Personally, I'm glad they're out of the picture, even though I love Bill's politics in the beginning. But when it came down to his interests, he always sides with what's best for him at the expense of what's best for everybody else. I don't know.
Yeah, no, so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, yeah, listen, I know you're a big Clinton fan too, and I was. You know, I knew Bill Clinton, especially back in the 90s, you know, 93 when he did all that. You know, I went to the White House. He invited me there. I remember sitting with him and Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, and I got to ask some questions, and he was trying to get support in the Arab community for the peace process that the radical extremists, I blame, destroyed. But then toward the end, he just kind of decided his legacy, you know, needed to be repaired, and he pushed and, you know, really kind of he destroyed what he put together, I thought. So anyway, we only got a few minutes, about 7 more minutes though, but Biden and Trump, what do you think is going to happen there? In Michigan, you think Biden is going to take it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is by what margin. I just think right now Donald Trump's in trouble nationally. He's in trouble in Michigan. He's got, about 3.5 months to turn it around. I just don't think he's capable of it. I mean, he doesn't, you know, he surrounds himself with a bunch of yes men. He doesn't listen to his staff and his cabinet. You know, he likes to fire from the hip, and he's not very good at it. I just think it's going to be really hard for him to turn this around.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Trump's ego prevents him from really kind of holding on to office. I'm going to be surprised if he pulls it off. But I do think this Black Lives Matter and the rioters and the protesters and the arsonists. Now in Detroit, you didn't see a lot of that. But in Chicago, there were like 40 businesses that were destroyed by protesters under the banner Black Lives Matter. And 12 of them happen to be Arab American businesses, and nobody cares for us. Our businesses get destroyed, and I'm telling you, nobody, because we're so busy fighting the Middle East conflict that we can't even get our own community to stand up for our own people. It's one of the problems that's really kind of, you know, holding back Arab Americans in this country. But these riots and the damage that's been caused all over, I think that actually plays into Trump's hands. This wave to defund the police, I think that plays into Trump's hands. I know a lot of people who did want to support him who are angrier now about what Black Lives Matter is doing and how people like even Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago, she took down the Columbus statue over in the middle of the night because protesters didn't want Christopher Columbus, you know, to be on display in Grant Park where he's been since the World Columbian Exposition in 1893. Suddenly Columbus is a bad guy. People, I think, are angry. What do you think of that theory?
Yeah, I think we need to be careful comparing the Black Lives Matter movement, which is in the Black Lives Matter movement, and comparing that to the riots. I don't know if there's an equal comparison. I just think we need to be careful when we say that. But there's no question that as society is moving and changing, and we are questioning who we appreciate and who we respect and honor in this country, there's going to be a blowback. There's going to be people who are going to be really upset by that. But I would argue that for a lot of those people who are really frustrated and angry by that and are angry by the Black Lives Matter movement, we're going to vote for Donald Trump anyway. And I do think when you look at white suburban women, they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. I would argue a good number of Muslim Americans are not going to vote for Donald Trump. A good number of African Americans aren't going to vote for Donald Trump. I mean, don't forget, about 3 months ago, the Republican Party was doing outreach to the African American community, and their goal is to suppress the African American community vote. But I mean, that's completely blown up in their face now.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I mean, it's not I'm not criticizing the principle of Black Lives Matter. I think the principle is good, but I think it got out of hand. I think people are afraid. Now when you have a Black Lives Matter protest and again, I don't think it's as sharp in Detroit and Michigan as it is in other places. But when they get together and have a protest, there is a lot of rioting. There's a lot of danger. And I'm not saying the organizers are promoting this, but I'm saying that in the cover of that protest, you're seeing a lot. We've seen huge amounts of damage and violence every night on TV. And, we have the highest, death rate in Chicago now, gang violence, and nothing's being done about it. Instead, they're blaming the police for everything. I think that plays into his hands, though.
I agree.
I don't know.
I think this whole defund the police movement, I think if they would have called it reform the police, I think it would be more acceptable.
Yes.
I think when you call it defund the police, I think it's incredibly stupid, and I think it just plays into Donald Trump's hand. And, it frustrates me when people like Rashida Tlaib say defund the police, because I don't think it helps.
Yeah, I agree with you. Dennis, any final thoughts? We only got about a minute left. So what's your website? And tell us you have a podcast, don't you? The Friday podcast?
Yeah, so my website is dennoresearch.com, and I do the Friday morning podcast, and I just released my newest podcast. It comes out every Friday. Actually had an Arab American, Brian Masalam. He's an Arab American. He's on the Michigan State University Board of Trustees. He's running for re-election or renomination by the Democratic Party. So if you check out the Friday morning podcast at dennoresearch.com, there's an Arab American who's looking to run for re-election in Michigan.
All right, Dennis Denno, thank you again. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody out there at WNZK AM 690 Radio Land for listening to us. We'll have this podcast later on today at thearabstreet.org or look it up on iTunes or Spotify. I'm Ray Hanania. Visit my website at hanania.com to get all the information about all my columns. Dennis, you have a great day. We'll talk again. If we do another show, maybe we'll do a post-election show. We'll bring a few people on to kind of analyze what actually happened on August 4th. It'll be interesting. Dennis, have a great day.
Hey, thanks for having me on. You're doing a great job.
All right, we'll see you. And everybody, you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you again. Back to you, Mike. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.